Morning, everybody. So obviously, I'm not there in front of you. So here's your agenda for today. First off, there's no instruments in the room, as you could probably tell. So tests won't be until the week of the 27th. That's a little pushed back from what I originally planned. We will probably end up bringing them back to the room Tuesday morning. And we should be able to get at least a little bit of playing done on Tuesday. So the 27th looks like a good date for the test to start. So be prepared for that because that's the end of the quarter and I want to get them done and put in the grade book for the end of the quarter. We're going to go into how microphones work. This is kind of starting into what we're going to be doing for the next unit, but there's no point in wasting the 2 days in between, so we're going to get started with that. And then we're going to talk about distortion, which is our first recording error that we're going to deal with. And then there's going to be a question for you to try and figure out an answer to. This is not really a right-wrong answer. This is something for you to consider and try and build some skills and think about how you would handle that if you were out recording in the field. So, before we get to microphones, we need to talk about what sound actually is and how sound works. So sound is really just vibrations. And the lovely thing about this lesson is you get to laugh at how terribly I draw. So this is our person. If you want to imagine he's me, because you are mean or whatever, go for it. And he's speaking. As we speak, our vocal cords vibrate back and forth, which the vocal cords hit the air inside your throat and your mouth, and the air inside your mouth starts to vibrate, and then it moves out of your mouth, hitting all of the air particles in between your mouth and someone else's ear. That is a wonderfully drawn ear. Don't you deny it. So these air particles, they vibrate. These ones hit those hit these hit them, and they eventually make contact with your eardrum and some bones and then your brain. Okay? And your brain goes, oh, I know he's saying blah. This is basically why everyone stresses hearing protection at loud concerts, because these air molecules are making physical contact with your ear. At higher volumes, it is basically the same as wandering onto a highway, right? If you're in a parking lot and step in front of a car, it might hurt a little bit, but it's not going to be that big a deal. If you're wandering into a highway, there's going to be some big problems. Okay? And the thing about your hearing is that damage is permanent. Pretty sure that's how that's spelled. Whatever damage happens to your hearing now is going to stay there your entire life. There is no healing that happens inside your ear. Okay? So now that we got the PSA out of the way, this is our first type of microphone that we're going to talk about. It is called a dynamic microphone. Dynamic basically means changing or moving. So we're going to see in this microphone a lot of moving parts. We start off with most microphones with a curved piece. If we were looking at a front view, it would be a circle that's kind of indented towards the middle. Okay? This is from the side, kind of like cut in half. So it's a curved piece. It is called a diaphragm. If you're ever wondering how to spell it, always remember you don't pronounce the G. So you spell it diaphragm, but you don't actually say that because that's silly. So this diaphragm is connected to a wire, and this wire wraps around itself in a coil. Okay, so it wraps around like that. And this wire is surrounded entirely by a magnet. In reality, this magnet would just be a circle around the entire piece of wire, but we're kind of looking at a cut in half sort of view. So we have this magnet. And you're not really far enough in science yet, but when you take a magnet and you've got wire running through, when you move that wire, you get electricity. So as we got two wires coming out of here for electricity, as you speak, these air molecules are vibrating and they hit the diaphragm. The diaphragm wiggles back and forth, moves the wire coil back and forth, and sends a signal out to your computer or whatever you're recording onto. What this also basically is, if you just flip the direction, instead of getting sound in to the wire out as electricity, you put electricity in. This is basically what a speaker is. I will show you one up close and personal when I'm back next week, but this is literally what a speaker is. You put the electricity in, that forces the wire to move inside the magnet, which makes the diaphragm move, which sends the wiggly air out towards you. Cool? Cool. The best thing about this is that you can scale it up. So if you need to put out a lot of sound or accept a lot of sound, you make a bigger speaker microphone head. Make it 12 inches, 24 inches, whatever. As long as you have enough current going in or out, this is going to work no matter how big it is. We'll add that in. Okay. Moving on to the next type, which is probably the type that if you're going to run across, you definitely have. You'll see what I mean in a minute. This is called a condenser. Basically, there is a space inside the microphone that gets smaller and wider as the sound comes in. That's why it's called a condenser, because this area is condensing. But the one we're going to look at is a very specific type. Okay? This is called an electret. Not super important that you remember the name, but whatever. We have two metal plates. Okay? This one, imagining that it's at the back of the microphone, is going to stay still. It doesn't move. And it also has a constant charge. This would mean either it has a power supply to it or it is magnetized, either one. Very similar to the dynamic where it has that magnet set at the back. And as the sound comes in on the wiggly air, it pushes this back towards the other plate, and the nearness of this second plate to the first one will give that signal to tell the whatever you're recording onto what the sound is. The best part about this type of metronome microphone is that this space right there does not have to be very wide at all, like thousandths of an inch. So these get real tiny. Okay? If you take a look at your phone, not now, but sometime today, since obviously you don't have them on you and they are in your locker and off, right? At the bottom of your phone, you'll see, that's the bottom of the phone, your headphone jack, if you're like cool like everybody should be, your charging port somewhere in the middle. You'll see probably 5 or 6 dots, maybe a double row if you're fancy. That series of dots there is your speaker. And then either on this side or kind of over by the headphone jack, you'll see one tiny dot all by itself. That is an electret microphone. That is how tiny these things can get. And you know that if you're on FaceTime or whatever way you use to call people that isn't normal over the phone calling, that audio quality is actually pretty good. For as small as that is a pretty good recording quality, because a lot of money has gone into making it smaller and better, or at least maintaining the same quality as it gets smaller so they can fit more cooler stuff inside the phone. So those are our two main types of microphones. That's a real big simplification, but that's basically all we need to know for right now. So let's get into some issues with these microphones. Distortion is one of the ones you're probably most familiar with, even though you don't know it. Just like nod to yourself if you've ever heard any song that was labeled that on YouTube or something similar. This whole genre, I guess we'll call it, is basically built on distortion. What distortion is that you are overpowering your audio equipment. You are either putting in too much sound or expecting too much out of it for it to actually handle. If we take a look at a side view of our dynamic microphone, okay, draw the magnet in. If we start to get distortion, that means that this diaphragm and this wire are being asked to push further than it can really comfortably go. Okay? If you get a mild distortion, it's just pushing that little hair too far. There's a comfortable range that it likes to sit in, and it likes to be there. And if you push it outside that range, you're going to get some funky effects. Okay, I'm moving closer to the microphone right now, and you probably can start to hear some weird things happening with my voice, maybe getting a little crackly or a little overpowering to your ears. Okay, this is probably coming out as distortion. The extreme of this, I'm backing away now, is called clipping. If you've listened to some of this, you've probably heard this without knowing what it is. It's kind of like a clicking, high-pitched, kind of thumpy sound. We know that we don't just leave speaker heads open to the air. That's generally a bad idea. We have them inside some sort of enclosure to keep them safe, to keep people from touching them. When you get clipping, this speaker head, microphone, diaphragm, whatever end of the system we're on, is hitting against the edge of the enclosure. Or going back, it's hitting against the back edge. That's bad. That would be like, if you think that's good, then you probably like hit your head off the wall for fun. This is a bad thing for speakers to do. Okay? So, the other bad thing about distortion is that once you record it, it's stuck there. All right? It's like that one annoying cousin that you have that you invite over and they just stay too long. Once you record something and it has distortion, it is very difficult to get it out of the recording, and it is definitely beyond what capabilities we have in here. So really, your only option when you record is to re-record if you get distortion, which, let's be honest, is a terrible thing to have to do if you're almost done with a project and then it turns out that everything is bad. Okay? So we have to be very cautious about how we record so we don't get this, because we then have to redo it. This is especially a problem in interviews and field recording. In interviews, you might have someone who's not familiar with how to use a microphone, and that could cause a lot of distortion, and you don't want to have to ask them to re-record, because then you're not getting a real, genuine response. You're getting them attempting to do what they did before, and that's not the same. And in field recordings, you have issues like wind or extraneous noise or just like the general hubbub of life that can overpower the microphone and cause a lot of issues. Okay? So now you're probably going, oh, you're going to be grading me on this. How do I not do it? Oh, cool. My phone's at 5%. Great. I'll try to be quick. We avoid it by not being too loud. Okay? So we monitor our own volume on ourselves. But sometimes that's not always an option. Sometimes you have a person who's coming in who's not familiar and they're just a loud person, and you don't want to be rude and ask them to like dial it back, because you want their real response. So what you can do is lower the sensitivity. Okay? This might be a little too advanced for what we do, but on some more powerful equipment, you can definitely adjust this so you don't get as much input from the same sound. And one of the most effective ways that is definitely going to be helpful to you is to move the mic away. Okay? You probably see a lot if you watch people performing live. They're basically like eating the microphone. I have no idea how to draw. Like they've got the microphone right up to their lips. That's a terrible way to do a recording if you're trying to make it clear and not like project to thousands of people. Okay? What you want to do is set the microphone up so that there's like 6 to 12 inches between your mouth and the microphone. So there's plenty of room for that sound to diffuse. And if you do happen to get a little bit louder, it's not like you're right up in front of it and it's going directly into the microphone. Okay? So, the question for you. There is a thing for you to listen to that is posted to the same post as the video. The question is, since you can obviously hear that there's a lot of change in the volume of the speaking voice from word to word and sentence to sentence, how might you manage to balance the low volume moments and the high volume moments? Especially when it comes to talking about distortion. How can we manage to catch the low volume and the high volume, since we might want to lower sensitivity to avoid the high volume peaks and distortion, but we don't want to miss the low volume because that might be a really intimate idea that's being shared. Okay? What do you think might be some solutions to manage this so that we can catch the low volume and avoid distortion on the high volume? Okay, that's your question. Use complete sentences. I probably should say this even though I don't think I should have to. Complete sentences, more than one, and explain why you think your idea would work. Okay? So, your job is to answer this question in more than one complete sentence, explain why your idea would work, and enjoy listening to whatever it is I have posted for you. Okay? Have a great day.